The New Jersey Bank Marketing Association presents its Forecast 2013 seminar. This program was recorded December 6, 2012, in Clark, New Jersey. In this program, an economic outlook presentation by James Hughes, Dean of the Edward J. Bloustein School of Planning and Public Policy at Rutgers University. Introducing Dean Bloustein is Jane Gore of Merrill Lynch.
Our next speaker is Dr. James Hughes, Dean of the Edward J. Bloustein School of Planning and Public Policy at Rutgers University. Dr. Hughes is a nationally recognized academic expert on demographics, housing, and regional economics, and was a contributing editor to American Demographics from 1982 to 1996. He is the author or co-author of 33 books and monographs and more than 150 articles, generally focusing on housing, demographics, and economic development patterns. A member of the Rutgers faculty since 1971, Dr. Hughes has been the director since 1988 of the Rutgers Regional Report, which has produced 35 major economic, demographic, housing studies on New Jersey and the New York region. He has provided extensive budgetary and economic testimony before many New Jersey state legislative committees and has provided numerous policy briefings both in Washington and Trenton on demographics, housing, and economy. He was recently a member of Governor Christie's Housing Opportunity Task Force. Let me introduce Dr. Hughes. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me back there? Thank you for that kind introduction. Truth in advertising, however. I do appreciate the plug for the books. Unfortunately, they are like most Rutgers books. Once you put them down, they're virtually impossible to pick up again. Let me begin with an old parable. On the first day, God created the sun. So the devil immediately countered and created sunburn. On the second day, God created sex. In response, the devil quickly created marriage. The devil was on a roll. On the third day, though, after a long search for another virtue, God finally created an economist. Now, this was a really tough one for the devil, but in the end, and after an awful lot of thought, he created a second economist. So, in any case, I'm not revealing my creator. Two admonitions before we begin. Number one, I've often been accused of being much better at forecasting the past than forecasting the future. And second, I've also been accused of being the Dr. Kevorkian of the New Jersey economy. Very unfair, but probably due to the very simple fact that I forecast fully nine of our last 5 recessions. So you are twice forewarned. My basic goal this morning is to provide an overview of the maturing economic recovery in the nation and New Jersey. And this will take the form of 9 basic factoids and observations. This slide shows the length of all the recessions in the United States since 1929. The bottom bar is the mother of all recessions, the famous Great Depression, which lasted 43 months, August 29 to March 33. The Great Recession, the top bar, technically began in June of 2000, or December 2007, and then ended in June 2009. As I think you can see, its 18-month length makes it the longest recession in the United States since the Great Depression. Previously, as can be seen in this slide, the longest post-war recessions before that were those of 73 to 75 and 81 to 82. Both of those lasted 16 months. However, as we will see subsequently, while it was only 2 months longer, that is, the Great Recession was only 2 months longer than those predecessors, its depth was more than double of both of them. But the relentless odometer of economic history continues. This December, this month actually marks the 60th month, a full 5 years since the start of the Great Recession in December of '07. Believe it or not, this month also marks the 42nd month since the start of the recovery, again, which began in June 2009. I think more people in New Jersey believe in flying saucers than believe the recovery is actually 42 months old. In fact, I think more people in New Jersey believe in that they were abducted by aliens than believe it's 42 months old. But 42 months it is. Now, one reason for this skepticism is the deep employment deficit that confronts both the United States and New Jersey. And this deficit persists despite job growth, which was not too bad the past 3 years, which leads to factoid 2. We have been moving forward positively, but steep employment deficits remain. This slide can be broadly interpreted as sliding down the employment mountain, the deep trough that we were stuck in, and then the gradual recovery as you move toward the right side of the slide. Now, each bar represents the cumulative job loss each month since the start of the recession in December of '07. The numbers are in thousands. There are 58 months or bars in the slide, January '08 through October 2012. Tomorrow we'll get the November number. By June 2009, the technical end of the recession, we had lost an unprecedented 7.7 million private sector jobs, 7.7 million over 18 months. And that's indicated by the box titled Recession's End. However, even though the recession officially ended, employment declines continued for another 8 months. Losses finally bottomed out in February 2010 at just over 8.8 million jobs, and that's indicated by total loss in the slide. So the cumulative employment loss 26 months after the start of the recession reached a staggering 8.8 million private sector jobs. The previous record was 2.6 million, so this was more than triple that job loss. Then finally, in March 2010, employment finally started to increase and the blue bars started to shrink. Now, as indicated by the green line and box, nearly 5 million private sector jobs were created over the next 32 months. That's between February 2010 and October 12. So the good news is the total recovery to date is now 5 million jobs rounded off. The bad news is, as was pointed out earlier, despite this growth in October 2012, the cumulative losses still stood at approximately 3.9 million private sector jobs. And that's indicated on the far right side of the slide by the box that says current deficit. So we still have a long road ahead of us to achieve full job recovery. Now, I should have pointed out to you earlier that there are 3 kinds of economists in New Jersey. Those that can count and those that can't. And all 3 types have never demonstrated any visible skills in predicting full recovery points. Okay, let's summarize with a simpler bar chart. Now, as an aside, there's absolutely no political significance to this, but it just so happens in this slide, red is bad and blue is good. During the 18-month recession and the 8 months which followed, the United States lost more than 8.8 million private sector jobs. That's the far left bar in the slide, December '07, February 2010. That employment finally started to recover, as shown by the second or middle bar. During the 32-month period from February 2010 until October 2012, the nation recaptured approximately 5 million jobs. So we have recovered 57% of our recessionary job losses, 5 million out of 8.8 million. And that leaves a current deficit on the far right bar, 3.9 million jobs. So we still have to regain 3.9 million jobs just to get back to where we were in December of '07 when the recession began. Think late 2014 if we avoid a recession. Now, earlier this morning, I was asked, why did you ever make a career choice to become an economic analyst and to have to actually deal with data like this all the time? I replied that while I was an undergraduate, I discovered that I had a real flair with numbers. But then I came to the very harsh realization that I simply did not have enough personality to make it as an accountant. My apologies to anybody in the accountancy. Okay, fair is only fair. It's time for revenge of the accountancy. A woman hears from her doctor that she has only a half a year to live. Distraught, the woman asks the doctor, "What should I do?" Doctor advises her, "Quickly marry an economist." The woman asks, "Will marrying an economist cure my illness?" "No," the doctor answered, "but it's going to make the 6 months seem like a lifetime." Okay, number 3, the deep employment hole 2. Now, an equivalent relative employment deficit persists in New Jersey. And so since this is an equal opportunity presentation, in this slide, blue is bad. In June 2009, and I have all the sequences already posted on the slide, the technical end of the recession, New Jersey had suffered employment losses of approximately 208,000 jobs. That's the left box indicated by recession's end. But exactly like the nation, employment in New Jersey continued to decline for another 8 months, finally bottoming out in February 2010. At that time, the state had lost 248,000 private sector jobs, just shy of 250,000. That's in the middle of the slide indicated by total loss. Then, like the nation, starting in March, growth resumed, and over the next 31 months through September, the last month when the slide was made, private sector employment grew by 85,000 jobs. That's shown by the green line and the green box. That's the good news, just like the nation. The bad news is that the cumulative losses still stood at 163,000 private sector jobs in September. And that's in the far right bar in the slide indicated by current deficit. So there are still 163,000 fewer private sector jobs in the state than in December of 2007, 57 months earlier when the recession began. So let's put this in that simple bar chart again. A loss of 248,000 jobs during the 26 months through February 2010. Then it recovered about 85,000 jobs. That's the middle blue bar between February 2010 and August 2012, the middle bar. And that leaves a deficit, or through September 2012, that leaves a deficit of about 163,000 jobs, the right bar in the slide. And you can see New Jersey's recovery has been substantially weaker than that of the nation. The nation's recovery is over 50%. New Jersey's is about 1/3. Nonetheless, progress is being made, as indicated by the 2 green lines in the 2 slides. That's the 5 million rebound nationally, the 85,000 in the state. So the recovery is coming down the track. So that's the good news. But we have to keep this magnitude in perspective. In terms of the context of what's needed, it's certainly not a full gauge recovery. I mean, some of you in the audience may have had model trains in your youth. This is maybe O gauge recovery as it stands right now. Now, I was also asked earlier, what was the allure of becoming an economist? Well, I thought of 3 reasons. Number 1, you are able to talk about money without ever having made any money. Number 2, you get to say trickle down with a straight face. And number 3, if you rearrange the letters in economics, you can get comic nose. Detailing the positive employment trajectory. Okay, this is the nation. These are the job decline and growth annually. So in 2009, measured December to December, the nation was hemorrhaging jobs. We lost nearly 5 million jobs in 2009 alone. Now, payroll employment statistics were compiled for the first time in the United States in 1939. The worst year ever in the subsequent 72 years was 2009. So if you survived 2009, congratulations. I doubt if it's going to get worse than that again. But stability and slow growth returned in 2010. That's the middle blue bar, a gain of 1.2 million private sector jobs rounded off. Then in 2011, we had a net increase of nearly 2.1 million jobs. That actually turned out to be quite a strong performance. Not quite industrial strength, but quite respectable. So minus 5 million, plus 1.2 million, plus 2.1 million during the past 3 years, applying all of the keen analytical ability that I've honed during my many years at Rutgers, I think I discern a trend in the making here. The key question is, will it continue? That's the current uncertainty, or one current uncertainty. Now, you know, I really expected a tough audience this morning, and I have not been disappointed. The last time I faced such a tough audience was when I spoke before a group of subprime mortgage brokers in Nevada. And after that, I vowed never again to give another presentation at a federal penitentiary. The new worry, two perspectives. Following the strong 2011 job performance, the U.S. entered 2012 like an economic lion. In January, we added a stunning 277,000 private sector jobs, followed by 254,000 in February. If we annualize those 2 months, we were on track to add 3.2 million jobs in 2012. So seemingly, we were off to the economic races. However, the economy failed to cooperate. By June, the far right bar, it looked like we were reduced to economic lamb. So economic swagger yielded to economic stagger. And it looked like we were about to hit the great stall. I think if you extended that green line to the right, that would take us from economic lion to economic lamb to lamb chops. Fortunately, there was a bounce back from the June low over the next 4 months through October. So it looks like we avoided the great stall, but experienced instead the great swoon. Bottom line, at the end of the day, 2012 is going to fall short of 2011. It won't be a bad year, maybe about 1.8 million private sector jobs. But we're also going to have to factor in the effects of Hurricane Sandy, and we'll get those details tomorrow at about 8:30. Still, job growth will be sufficient to reduce the unemployment rate. Benchmark, based on demography, we add about 1 million persons a year to the labor force. So just to hold the unemployment rate constant, we have to add 1 million jobs per year. So 1.82 million jobs, that's the reason why the unemployment rate has trended down, in addition to people dropping out of the labor force. Now, I think I also should have pointed out to you that economic forecasters, unfortunately, are not held in very high esteem in New Jersey. In fact, we're ranked just above lawyers, but barely so, which raises the following question. Why are economic forecasters and lawyers buried 24 feet underground? The answer is, deep down, we're very good people. Okay. This slide, this is number 6, post-recession employment recoveries. This is a perspective. And I want to look at historic recovery metrics. Now, this slide presents historic recovery trajectories for the past 4 downturns, including the Great Recession. It presents by month the percentage employment change since the start of the recession. The horizontal scale, going left to right, presents the months since the start of the recession. The vertical scale represents the percentage change in employment since the start of the recession. Okay. This blue line is the 16-month long July 81 to November 82 recession. Again, that was one of those 16-month long recessions that was presented in the initial bar chart. At its low point, 16 months in, employment was down by about 3%. But at 28 months after the recession began, it was down to 0%. So in essence, employment declined through month 16 and then grew month 16 through month 28. So 28 months after the recession began, full employment recovery was achieved. Now, you've seen economic calligraphy noted over the past several years. This pattern here is the classic V-shaped recovery, a sharp downturn followed by a very sharp recovery or bounce back. And that's actually the last V-shaped recovery we have experienced in the United States almost 30 years ago. The red line is the 8-month-long 90-91 recession. As you can see, it was far shallower than its predecessor with an employment decline of about 1.4% reached at about 19 months. Nonetheless, it took slightly longer, 31 months, for full employment recovery. I guess you could call this pattern sort of an elongated soup dish recovery. It was not a V-shaped recovery. It was a very shallow recession and then a very, very shallow, long recovery. The green line, that's the 8-month-long 2001 recession, started in March of 01, ended in November of 01. Employment in that recession didn't bottom out until 29 months after the recession began. At that point, employment was down 2%. So it was an even further elongated soup dish recovery. And it took 47 months to reach full employment recovery. So sequentially, 28 months, 31 months, 47 months. Again, applying all of my keen analytical ability, I think I am able to discern a second trend here, ever lengthening periods of job recovery. Finally, this was the current Great Recession, lasted 18 months, as we noted earlier. The employment decline at its nadir was 6.5%, more than double that the 81-82 downturn, which, as I noted earlier, was the previous worst recession since the Great Depression. So that employment trough was reached 29 months after the recession began. Now at 58 months, we have yet to achieve full recovery. And right now we are still down 3% from where we were when the recession began. So we've extended our trend. Our forecasting prowess was proved. It's in unprecedented and uncharted territory. Put a ruler to that line and you'll see the time it's eventually going to take to cross above the 0% line. Now, number 7, what about the New Jersey trajectory? Technically, the relative employment improvement in New Jersey in 2011 was even more dramatic than that of the nation compared to 2010. Just like the nation, we were hemorrhaging jobs in 2009. We were sliding into the economic abyss, but the hemorrhage was staunched in 2010. We finally had a gain, 10,200, modest, but at least it was a gain. And it was followed by a more robust 33,400 job gain in 2011. So 2011's job growth was triple that of 2010. The nation's was about 80% higher. And actually, 2011 turned out to be the best job growth year since 2000 in New Jersey. This slide shows the annual change in private sector employment for the past decade, with 2011 and 2012 on the far right, and year 2000 on the far left. So as you can see, the good news is 2011 has surpassed every year since the year 2000. Bad news is it was a pretty bad decade, so that was not a high benchmark to surpass. During the late 1990s, we were averaging between 60 and 90,000 jobs per year. It's just that really the 2000 to 2010 period was New Jersey's lost employment decade. We ended the decade with fewer jobs than we started the decade. Our business climate collapsed, and those mini blue bars in the middle of the slide was probably the weakest economic recovery in the history of New Jersey. That was a prelim. On the far right was 2012. We were on track to surpass actually 2011, but Sandy is going to obliterate that estimate. We'll get, I think probably 2 weeks from yesterday or 2 weeks from today, we'll get the New Jersey estimate for October. It may well obliterate that entire 37,000 jobs in that 1 month alone. So we're going to have a real hole the final 2 months of the year. But then there'll be some snapback through the first quarter, second quarter of 2013. Now, in the broad, and this was mentioned earlier, one of the reasons for this slow growth, both nationally and in New Jersey, is that the era of consumer retrenchment is upon us. This is really a long-term trend, a long-term correction. And I think as we all realize, the once all-powerful locomotive of consumer spending has started to run out of steam. For more than 2 decades, shopping and consumption was like a drug for most Americans. We became unrepentant shopaholics. We became the most overextended consumers in world history by maxing out on plastic and using our houses as ATM machines. We were living in happy land, spending what we did not have. So we maintained and increased our standard of living the old-fashioned way by borrowing and living off of our core set of economic and income assets. And Kevin presented some of the staggering debt numbers. Now, I don't want to sound like an Old Testament prophet railing against human frailties, because I know it is difficult to plan, to save, and invest, whether it's government or an individual. But it can be done, as my own experience shows. Now, when I was a kid, I used to play a popular game known as Spin the Bottle. Now, perhaps for many of you this was before your time, but in this game, or one version of this game, a girl spins a Coke bottle, and when it points at a boy who is playing, she either has to kiss him or pay him a nickel. Now, when I was a kid, a nickel had significant purchasing power. Now, I played this game an awful lot when I was young, with the unexpected result, by the age of 14, I owned my first home. So, very painful, but it can be done. But it wasn't done. We were living the debt-fired dream of consumption without end, and household deleveraging still has a long way to go. Now, for those words you have been longing to hear, perhaps desperately longing to hear, in conclusion, actually that sigh of relief I just heard was premature. My conclusions tend to be quite long. Definition of a second wind, what a speaker gets when she or he says, in conclusion. Seriously, I think it's well recognized, and I am the only totally objective person in the state of New Jersey. And it is my objective opinion that after doing economic forecasts for more than 3 decades, you should now take my projections as gospel. You have my personal and unconditional guarantee that occasionally they'll be right. And my basic forecast is that the recovery will continue in 2013, but as Chris has extensively detailed, there are still substantial uncertainties related to the fiscal cliff. So we have not yet fully invented our economic future. And in the near term, the U.S. continues to remain vulnerable to external shocks and global uncertainties, such as the current European recession, the potential of a full European zone meltdown, seemingly intractable Middle East problems, and slowing growth in Asia. Good news is that the U.S. will probably have the strongest growth rate among the advanced nations or the fully developed nations. The bad news is that growth will only be about 2%, as Kevin had forecast. So we're on top, not because we're good, it's just because everybody else is far worse looking forward. Nonetheless, we have avoided economic Armageddon, and we were probably closer to that than we all realized, and some progress has been made. But I think I pointed out that it will take a significant amount of time until full recovery is achieved, and there is no way to sugarcoat that reality. Nonetheless, thinking longer term, we may now be approaching the point where the state has to be totally remarketed and rebranded to compete in the new economic world. Now, there are always branding opportunities, particularly since things are not always what they seem to be. So you really have to keep your eyes open for unanticipated possibilities. A brief story about Frank Perdue, the chicken man who passed away in 2005 at age 84, proves really instructive about branding opportunities and finding creative branding formats. Now, Perdue was ubiquitous on TV in the 70s and 80s, and he was singularly responsible for actually branding what was then a very boring commodity. There was no market differentiation for chicken. Chicken at that point was chicken. Remember the phrase on TV? It takes a tough man to make a tender chicken. And Perdue was very aggressive and creative in his branding efforts. At one point, he actually went to Rome and got an audience with the Pope. He said, "Your Holiness, I have a proposition for you. I would like the Lord's Prayer changed by one word. Instead of 'Give us this day our daily bread,' I would like it to read, 'Give us this day our daily chicken.' I will offer you $250 million to make that change." Pope threw him out. 2 weeks later, Perdue returned and said, "This is more important than I thought. I will offer you $800 million to change the Lord's Prayer to 'Give us this day our daily chicken.'" He was once again dispatched. But he was very, very aggressive and persistent, came back again, and finally offered $3 billion to change the word bread to chicken. The Pope was visibly shaken by this sum of money. He immediately called Giuseppe, his secret trusted financial advisor, and asked, "How firm is our contract with Pepperidge Farm?" Finally, an old academic mentor of mine gave me the following presentation advice: speak the truth, but leave immediately thereafter. Thereafter has just arrived. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation from the New Jersey Bank Marketing Association. For more information, visit njbankmarketing.com. This podcast series is available for sponsorship. If you're interested, get more information at bit.ly/content sponsorship. We produce these programs in the studios of Lubetkin Global Communications in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, on the web at lubetkin.net. For everyone at the New Jersey Bank Marketing Association, this is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you out there on the net. Take good care.